afternoon. Cujo, what's up, man? How's it going? Give it a few more seconds for people to get in here, and then we'll start talking. Shall we? Ready for football, dude. Me too. I think we're all itching to get back in the NFL streets, man. What better way to start it out than a good Thursday night football game between Ravens and the Chiefs? How's it going, guys? How's it going? So, high level look at this game. Obviously, two teams with great offenses, Ravens and the Chiefs. Got a team total or game total of 46.5, which is on the higher side of things, -3 spread, so should be a tight game, close game, as Vegas predicts it, with the Chiefs being slight favorites. Let's get into. Let's talk about the Chiefs first. So obviously at the top we got Patrick Mahomes. The Chiefs are a team that like to pass the ball a lot. We saw it last year where even in games where they were leading, they passed the ball way more than every other team in the league, and in general just a really high pass volume. Why wouldn't you have a high pass volume when you got Patrick Mahomes under center? And the receiving core is, it's really spread out and thin, but they've got playmakers who can get it done. So there will be a lot of passing in this game by the Chiefs, and if it stays close, I assume the Ravens will as well. So Mahomes coming in with a 22 projection, which I think is slightly higher than Lamar Jackson's. I'm using ETR projections, by the way. Coming in with 15% captain ownership and 61 in the flex, which is pretty respectable. I think he's the second highest owned captain on the slate, yeah. Just behind Lamar. Higher in the flex, too. The way I'm sort of handling Patrick Mahomes tonight is that I kind of want to play him more at captain than I do at flex, although I do have a lot of him everywhere regardless. But the thing with Mahomes is, since he spreads the ball around so much, it's more likely that if Mahomes has a big game, not all of his wide receivers are going to get there. So take, for example, a game where Patrick Mahomes has 3 passing touchdowns and 300 yards, which would make him a good captain pick. And that could be 1 touchdown to Noah Gray, another touchdown to like McCole Hardman on a short slant route or something in the end zone, and then a pass to like Rashee Rice or Xavier Worthy. In that scenario, the receivers are only getting 12, 14, 16 points. Tunes are a little hot. Roger. We'll turn those down a bit. Like I was saying, I think there's a lot of scenarios where Patrick Mahomes gets there and gets to a good score that you're going to need in a lineup, but not all of his receivers do. So when I'm playing him, I kind of want to play him at captain and put maybe a receiver, 1 or 2 passing options in the flex, and really spread those out rather than playing Rashee Rice or like Xavier Worthy at captain, which is possible, but with the way that they spread out volume across the offense, I'm more likely to captain Mahomes than his receivers. So why don't we start talking about their receivers on Kansas City? Right, we've got some pretty extreme mispricing going on because the salaries came out so early. We've got Rashee Rice at 7,600, who's kind of operating as the alpha there, if you can call it that, in that offense. And Xavier Worthy kind of behind him at 5,800. we're going to see a lot of these players play tonight. As you can see, 13% captain for Rasheed, a little less for Xavier, but I'm expecting that a lot of these lineups are going to be played where we've got 4 Chiefs and 2 Ravens, just because of these salaries on Xavier Worthy and Rasheed Rice. It makes it really easy to stick those 2 in a lineup, and if you're playing those 2, you're going to want to play Patrick Mahomes as well. So that might be an area where I'm looking at it. If I want to get different, I'm probably not playing 4 Chiefs in a lineup, and if I am, I'm not playing both Rasheed and Xavier Worthy with Mahomes. I might take one or the other and then get somebody else lower in the depth chart on the receivers, or maybe Kelsey, maybe Gray, maybe even a running back. Yeah, what else can we say about the receivers on the Chiefs? I mean, if you look even further down, we've got McCole Hardman probably in for a couple targets, Sky Moore as well. But I mean, with the Chiefs, it's kind of hard to tell where the pass volume is going to go to. You can't really predict it game to game, especially with this being the first game of the season. We've seen preseason games, but those aren't always indicative of what's going to happen in the season. So I think my general synopsis on the Chiefs and the Chiefs passing game is Mahomes is a great play tonight. The receivers are a great play tonight, but I wouldn't captain one of them over somebody like Mahomes or Jackson or some of the Ravens options I like, just because of if you do that, you do have to plan for this scenario. I wouldn't play any of the other receivers in the flex where Mahomes throws 2 touchdowns or 3 touchdowns to the same receiver and they get all the points. As far as the running game goes, we've got Isaiah Pacheco. He's another great play tonight. I've got quite a bit of him at captain, sort of playing the game where everybody thinks this game's going to be a really high-scoring shootout game, and there's a very good chance that it could be, but you never know. And in some scenarios, we see a lot of running or rushing upside from Pacheco, and I think he's in a pretty good spot to do that. Goal line work, obviously, they get kind of tricky on the goal line, so you never know, but Pacheco has TD upside for sure. He's a great runner. You saw it last season. He had a lot of good long runs. Definitely a guy you want to consider in your captain pool, I would say. Hopping over to the Ravens side of things, we got Lamar Jackson up top under center, coming in at 16% captain ownership, 56 in the flex, so a little more owned than Mahomes at captain, but a little under-owned or less owned than Mahomes in the flex. I really like Lamar tonight at captain. I just don't think there's a game scenario where he can't shine. Obviously, he has rushing upside, both like between the 20s, as well as when they get in the red zone. It might change this year with the addition of Derrick Henry, but last year we saw a lot of design runs for Lamar in the red zone, and I think that his rushing upside, both rushing yards and rushing touchdowns, makes him a really good captain option. And he's a great passer as well. Plenty of games last year where he was, 3, 4, 5 touchdowns, and he's got 2 rushing, 3 passing. And if Vegas is right and they are dogs, the 3-point dogs in this game, we're going to see him playing from behind, hopefully passing more often, and it gives him great upside to be in a winning lineup at captain. I do like playing him at captain, like I said before, where it's not like Mahomes where he spreads the ball out a ton, but he does have rushing upside. So if he does score like 1 or 2 rushing touchdowns, those are touchdowns that aren't going to the receivers. It makes him a better captain spot. And as far as receivers go on the Ravens, obviously I love Zay Flowers tonight. He's going to be their wide receiver 1. Tight ends you got to consider. You got Mark Andrews up top, and then behind him Isaiah Likely. You got Nelson Aguilar as well as Rashad Bateman. These are all good stacking options, and I think if you're playing Lamar either in flex or captain, you're going to want one of those pass catchers, whether it's Bateman, Zay, Aguilar, Andrews, or Likely. I think they're all fine plays with Lamar. If you want to get different, I'd definitely go more for Rashad Bateman. I don't even think Zay Flowers is going to be super owned tonight. At 6% captain, 30 flex, so kind of standard average stuff going on there. Let's talk about the running backs, because obviously the Ravens brought in the big dog Derrick Henry this year. I don't know how much work they're going to give him right away. He's kind of getting older, kind of getting over the hump. He had an okay season last year. I wouldn't call it great, but it wasn't terrible. And it was done behind an offensive line of the Tennessee Titans, which is obviously not a very good line. So it's going to be interesting to see what he can do in Baltimore. He's going to have a better line to run behind, and I'm guessing a lot more of the goal line work, although it's hard to tell. Again, we don't really know the Ravens' plans on how they're going to utilize the backfield this year. But if I had to imagine, we're going to see a lot of Derrick Henry on first down, second down, and we're going to see a lot of Derrick Henry in the red zone. Behind him, you've got Justice Hill, who's going to kind of do that secondary, third down, pass catching, route running role. And we may see him in the red zone on design plays and stuff, but I think he's more in contention when the Ravens are playing from behind and they're trying to be a little bit quicker on offense and they want to be passing more. We'll see a lot more Justice Hill in that area, whereas if the Ravens are leading, we're probably going to see a lot more Derrick Henry. We're going to see a lot more running the ball, just trying to keep the Chiefs' offense off the field. As far as kickers and defenses go, they're fine plays here in the mid-range. I don't really have a preference to either, although I do think that if you're trying to be contrarian, a lot of people are going to be wanting to play skill position players, fill it up with receivers and running backs. There's a lot of good options that you could choose. And for the most part, I mean, people are excited to play football again, play lineups. And I don't know if you guys remember last year. I'll take you sort of in the time machine back to last year, but the primetime games were not good last year. I mean, like 90% of them were just terrible games. Granted, a lot of them weren't Ravens and Chiefs games, but something to consider that kind of people put on these rose-tinted glasses for these single-down showdown slates where anything can happen. And in the case where it is sort of like a defensive battle and there's not a lot of offensive scoring, these kickers and defenses are going to be, I think, underowned relative to their optimal rates. So if you're going to play the kickers and the defenses, definitely just get, a max 2 or max 3 of those of that group. You don't want to jam all of them in a lineup because your ceiling is just not high enough and there's not enough scenarios where that hits. Let's kind of look at the punt plays down at the bottom because there's some that are going to be viable if you want a really low owned piece with like a wild shot at maybe catching a touchdown, maybe doing something. Carson Steele is going to be way back in the backfield for the Chiefs. Did well in the preseason. I don't think he's going to get a whole lot of work this game, but he's somebody you can maybe turn to if you need salary. Down here we've also got like the tertiary or fourth round receivers, last read options for the Chiefs. We got McCole Hardman as well as Justin Watson. These guys are definitely guys that you can play with Mahomes at captain. They're going to be lower owned than like Kelsey and Rice and Worthy are. But like I said earlier, the Chiefs, they really pass the ball around a lot, and you don't really know who the ball's going to go to. So playing a guy like Justin Watson or McCole Hardman on the off chance, or even Sky Moore on the off chance that they catch, like a really long touchdown bomb, totally a viable play in big field stuff. For the Ravens down lower, we got Isaiah Likely, who's going to be running routes behind Mark Andrews, pretty cheap at $2,600. And he showed a lot of spark last year, a lot of games where he commanded a lot of targets, and I think that they're going to want to use him more this year. We'll kind of see them rotate around. Again, tight end 2 on the Chiefs, no Gray. I mean, he's had design plays last year. He's got touchdowns and showdowns last year. He's definitely a guy you can throw in to get contrarian if you're playing those Chiefs lineups. So, I mean, that's probably enough yapping about the slate and the options on it. If you guys haven't seen yet, this is our new user interface. Total revamp of what we had before. It's going to make it a lot easier for you guys to upload lineups, navigate between the optimizer and the sim, control everything sort of on one screen. So obviously more improvements to come to this, but we wanted to get it out for you for NFL so you could play around with it. So it's going to make the whole process a lot easier for you guys to build good lineups. So let's go in and sim a contest. We're not going to do the millie because it's going to take a bit longer than I really want to on the show, but we will sim something a little bit bigger, like the $5 flea flicker. We're going to go through our config settings over here. So we're going to run 50,000 simulations per field generation. So the way that these showdown sims now work is instead of running just one field of lineups 50,000 times, we're going to run that generationally, which means we'll run a sim with that field. We'll keep the top % of lineups that score really well, and then we'll feed them into a new field and run a new sim with them. So that's the number of generations here. We're going to run it 5 times, and we're going to hold over the top 5% of lineups. So after the first sim runs, it's going to take the top 5% lineups by ROI, and it's going to put them into the next generation of sim. And it's going to do that 5 times, and at the end, spit out the best lineups that made it through all the generations. This is a really cool feature for sims because it allows you to remove some of the variance that's inherent in lineup generation, where you can get some players bubbling up to the top in ROI that are just underrepresented in that field of sims. So this is going to allow us to cut down on those lineups. I've got my projection minimum at 0.8. Am I muted? No, I don't think so. Looks good for me. Check your YouTube settings. Question on the repo. I will do some I'll do some repo questions at the end here while we're waiting for the sim to run, but in the meantime I'll focus on web. I've got my projection minimum set at 0.8. Just because like this kind of group of players are players I don't really want to play. You can play them. They're going to be long shots in a big field, but I think there's other ways to get different, like leaving salary on the table, not playing like 4-2 Chiefs or 3-3 lineups. Getting different in your roster construction and your captain selection I think is going to be plenty tonight, where you don't have to dip down to players like this. So I've got my minimum set from here up, which I'd be okay with these guys getting in the lineups. Randomness at 100 because we're in a big field contest, and the more randomness the merrier. And again, I got my minimum lineup salary set low just because in Showdown it's totally okay to leave salary on the table. It's a great way to get unique, and I want to find those unique combinations. The rest are all defaults, so I'm going to go ahead and get that running. Just re-import projections, I guess. It's kind of mad at me. Boom. So I'll re-upload that, kind of give you a view of what it looks like to import projections. Really easy. You just load the file, make sure the columns are mapping correctly, and they'll set here. Make sure my settings are the same. They look the same. They look good. We'll go ahead and run that. So yeah, you can see it's starting out, and we're simulating field 1. So this is going to go through and run that first generation 50,000 times in the sim, and when it's done, it's going to take out the top 5% of lineups and run them in the 4 other generations. For the repo, I believe it is flex ownership, captain ownership, and flex ownership, Willie. So we got through 2 fields, running the 3rd. I'm kind of curious to see what bubbles up at the top here in our sims, what type of lineups we're getting. And just like that, we ran 5 generations of sims 50,000 times. And we can see what bubbled up here. So at the top, we've got a Rasheed Rice captain lineup with a KC4 stack. Like I said earlier, I think that this roster construction is going to be pretty popular. KC4, Baltimore 2. So if you're only playing a few lineups and you want to get different, I definitely recommend maybe trying a Baltimore 4, or like a KC2 with Mahomes captain and one of his pass catchers. Also noticing a lot of defense up top, so looks like the Chiefs bubbled up here pretty well. So kind of playing for that narrative where it's not a high scoring game and the defenses do come into play. Same with the kicker there. If it is a low scoring game, these kickers and defenses are going to start becoming more influential than the guys priced around them, the skill position players. projections live after stream. Yeah, I believe Jung's working on it, so you'll get a ping in the Discord when that's ready. So what I'm gonna do, I guess I can show you a bit of this interface. So this is sort of how you can build your entries now. We've got sort of defaults for the number of lineups you're playing, whether it's 20 or 150 or a custom number that you want to put in. You can set minimum number of uniques here, which dictates how many players are going to be unique between the two or between each and every lineup. So with min uniques of 2, we won't see a lineup where there's a gap of more than 2. Other cool things, obviously, we got all the table here that you can filter. So if I wanted to get unique by playing lower salary lineups, I could set a less than or equal to filter and set these less to 49,500. And what that's going to do is it's going to remove every lineup above that. So obviously, like, the more salary you use in a lineup on these big contests, the more likely you are to be duped. So an immediate way to get more different is just leaving more salary on the table, which these lineups are doing. Then over on the side here, you can see our player exposure and team exposure stuff. So let's say I wanted to play a lot more some Ravens skill positions. So like, say I wanted way more Zay Flowers, I could bump him up to like 45% instead of 12%. Hit my apply filter exposures, and when it runs through, it's going to spit out lineups with more Zay Flowers in it. So you can see now that I applied that, we've got them in half our lineups. So this is a way that you can take your lineups out of the sim and sort of massage them into what you want to play. But in the meantime, I'm going to download all of them, and we're going to take a look at them in Google Sheets, just so we can get a better idea and look at all the lineups at the same time. Actually, let's do it in new Google Sheets. That way I can share it with you guys, and you can look at some of the lineups, and if you want to play some of those, feel free. So let's go ahead and upload that. This is the 9-5 DK NFL Thursday Night Football Showdown. We'll go ahead and share this with you guys. Yeah, so the idea behind this view is, instead of taking your lineups like I am now and downloading them and filtering them in Excel, this allows you to filter columns like projection, ROI, all these columns you'll be able to filter on, and you can do it directly in Sight. And when you get to a point where you like your lineups, you can export 150 entries and just copy that straight to your upload file. So it just makes it easier to build lineups that you want. So all these are filterable. Player exposures are filterable and changeable. Just gives you more control over what you're playing. Yeah, so let's go ahead and make this look kind of pretty. Hide that column. We'll hide some of these other columns that aren't as important to look at. Okay. Hang tight with me while I do some formatting. Sort these by ROI and trim off, some of these lower lineups. We'll trim it off like around 5,000 or so. Okay. Well, actually, how many lineups were there? We could probably keep those lineups. The sheet's not too big. Primary and secondary stack, yeah. It's not working at the moment, but for example, these would work the same way, where if you didn't want any KC4 or KC5 or Baltimore 4, you just click the filter button, and like this one, we'd have an option for you to unselect those lineups. So looking at some of these high ROI lineups, we can go through and see that A lot of these lineups that are winning are leaving salary on the table, and that's just a way for those lineups to be unique. If you look at some of our primary stacks here, we're seeing a lot of KC heavy stuff in the top ROI. So much like the field, the Sims are liking 4 or 5 man KC stacks, and let's take a look at those in particular. So if I was playing these KC4 lineups, I'd want to do it in a way that's a bit different than the field, right? And I talked about this before, but instead of playing somebody like Rice or Kelsey or Worthy, what I would want to do for me personally is play Mahomes at the captain, where he's not as owned as he probably should be in captain, but over-owned in flex, and pair him with a couple pass-catching options, but not Worthy and Rice at the same time. So let's look at Patrick Mahomes' lineups. And what I see here is a lot of Rice and a lot of Worthy together. I would be, for example, let's just get rid of Xavier Worthy in these lineups. Okay, and now we can find some lineups that we're going to want to play or would be good plays. For example, this one up here. We're not spending the max salary, so we're going to be fairly unique there. We only have one of Rashee Rice and Xavier Worthy. We also have Travis Kelce and Noah Gray, which I probably wouldn't want to play together, both the tight ends. But we could swap those around, and we've got it running back with Lamar Jackson and Nelson Aguilar. If you look a bit lower, this one's kind of interesting. So we've got Mahomes with the pass catchers, Kelce, Rice, and Watson. And then running it back, we just have running back and kicker. So this might be a scenario where the Ravens get out ahead. Derrick Henry scores a few rushing touchdowns, and they're running the ball out. We've got Mahomes trying to catch up with his pass catchers. It does spend all the salary, though, so this might be a more common roster construction, just because psychology and people want to spend all the money that they have in a lineup. Yeah, so those are some examples of how I would filter down those lineups and pick. Go ahead and reset those. Another thing that you could do that I think is kind of interesting is play KC as 2, but do it with Mahomes at captain, right? So we know that a lot of the scoring on that offense can go through Mahomes, and there's games where Mahomes hits for a huge number, and there's not really one or two particular players with him that are taking along for the ride. So it would be interesting to play Mahomes at captain with one of his pass catchers like Rice, or what else we have? We got Kelsey, and I'm trying to find one with Worthy. Here's one with Worthy. So pairing him with just one of his playmakers who might catch a touchdown, and then run it back with the Ravens. So I like that scenario a lot. This is one way you can play Mahomes captain lineups and avoid dupes, is play just Mahomes and just one other player on the team. So let's take a look at some Baltimore stacks now. Baltimore 4 and Baltimore 3. Yeah, you can see Lamar Jackson up top, Zay Flowers, a lot of pass catchers, and then a couple Derrick Henry lineups as well. If you're playing Derrick Henry, I also think it's probably cool to try and aim for that lower scoring game where they're running the ball a lot, the Ravens get out to a lead, and if that's the case, kickers and defenses are more likely to be in play. Again, these are leaving salary on the table, so it's a good way to make sure you're not duped as much as you should be. Yeah. What else can we talk about here? Are there any sort of lineups you guys want to see as far as roster construction stacks, or captains, or flex players? Let me know. As far as sort of on the topic, some of the lower dupe lines. So since we ran this sim 5 times or so, we can sort of see the sim dupes, and they'll get carried over from field to field. So let's go ahead and format this as well so we can kind of see highs and lows, as well as geo mean here. geo mean and ownership sum are good ways to sort of figure out how owned your lineups are going to be. So let's take a look at some of these. So at the top here, we can see for ownership sum, the minimum value we have is 77 and the maximum is 243. So if we look at some of these chalkier lineups, really high up, they're going to project out fairly well, but it's going to be playing a lot of these sort of mid-range players, and you want to stay away from these high ownership sum lineups, obviously. So what we're going to be looking for is lineups that are more in this low hundreds to mid hundreds range. So all of these lineups here are going to be lower owned lineups. The geo mean reflects that, and if we go over from those, oops, these ones we were looking at, if I can do it, we can see that they're also lower in the sim dupes, with the exception of this one, which is a bit higher ownership. So these ones here, looking at them, pretty low on the sim dupes, pretty low in ownership sum. Highlight these and we can look at them. So we've got a Xavier worthy captain where we're not playing, you know, are the zeros a format issue? Yeah, they might be. Probably the way I pasted the data in here. This one is a Chiefs Onslaught 5-1. We're basically playing all the Chiefs with only Derrick Henry on the other side, which is totally a way they can play. The Chiefs can score a ton of points, spread the ball around, and it can totally, you know, they can put up 40 points and no one will blink an eye. Next one, we've got sort of a weird combination where we've got Baltimore 2, but they're the primary stack, which means they're the captain. So we've just got Mark Andrews and Lamar Jackson here, and they're running it back with Mahomes, Kelsey, Butker, and the Chiefs. That's another good lineup I'd consider playing. Leaving salary on the table, so there's definitely fewer dupes there than if we were spending all the salary. This one, for example, we're leaving a ton on the table. We've got Rashee Rice, Mahomes, Henry, Pacheco, Butker, and the Chiefs. So to me, this would be another low scoring game where we get a lot of rushing volume out of these guys, and the kickers get there and the defense gets there. So you can kind of see too that when you sort by ROI, we are sort of factoring in ownership to an extent, right? Because when you run these sims, lower owned lineups aren't going to be duped as much, which means they won't grade out well for ROI, and they will sink down a bit lower. So as you can see, as we get lower, we're getting more of these like 180, 190, 200 owned lineups, which otherwise might be good lineups, but they just get duped, you know, a bit. So if we take a look at one of these, like this 200 owned lineup, playing both quarterbacks, we're playing the alpha receiver, the alpha tight end, and we're playing some secondary options on the Chiefs, which, you know, I don't hate this lineup. It does have a high ownership sum, but we are leaving a good amount of money on the table where this won't be duped as much as we think it will be, you know? So certainly some ways we can get different there. I'm just excited for football, man. It's gonna be so good having football back. I do want to look at some onslaught lineups, so Baltimore 5 and KC 5 lineups. And kind of like I expected here, when you're playing these onslaught lineups, you're kind of playing for these lower scoring one-sided games, which makes more sense that these kickers and defenses bubble up to the top. So those are all KC 5s, so we see a lot of Chiefs. But if we look at just Baltimore 5s, I'm sure we'll see, the same thing. A lot of Justin Tucker and a lot of Ravens. So this is a way you can get unique in roster construction and not necessarily the people you're playing, because all these people are going to be owned, you know, fairly well. You don't have to get too off the board with low dollar, low owned punts. What you can get different with is your lineup stack. So playing these onslaught lineups, including the kicker and the defense, leaving a bit of salary on the table, these are, you know, good ways for you to build a lineup that not everybody else has. yeah, it's probably. Are there any changes you like to the default values for the config? There are, and it depends on the kind of contest I'm playing. So earlier when we ran this large field sim, you know that I left projection minimum pretty low, randomness pretty high, and lineup salary pretty low. What I would do is, if I was simming something a bit smaller, so like let's say the Spy, 555 entries, $100 entry. What I would typically do for a contest like this is I would bump up my projection minimum to probably around this area. Like I would probably go like 3.5 for my projection minimum. I'd bump my randomness down just a bit, but I still want a lot of randomness just because it is Showdown and things can happen. And I'd probably bring my minimum lineup salary up to 48,000, which again gives me enough room for those lineups to be built that are different, leaving salary on the table, but not leaving like $3,000 on the table in a 500-man field. So we'll run these and I'll throw them in here as well. So this is large field, and this will be our small field. See if we can just paint formatting in here. That would be nice. We'll take a look at these small field lineups and see sort of how they differ from large field. Excuse me. One other field I didn't mention that I probably should change is max percent off optimal. I'd likely bring that up from what I had it at. I had it at 35. I'm gonna go ahead and put that at 25, and we'll run it again, just because in these small field lineup or small field tournaments, you don't need to build lineups that are so off the board just because there's fewer people you're competing against. So we'll go ahead and take a look at these, see what's popping in the small field sims, download those, and import them to that sheet. Which again, if you didn't catch it earlier, or I'll pin it here in the YouTube chat. If you don't have the sheet yet, that's the link to it. You can come here and look at the different lineups we're building. Hide some of these columns so we can see all of it at once. Sort that, put on our ROIs, put this on. All right. Interesting to see how the sims factor into the player owned versus actual in slate locks. Yeah, I definitely agree there. With week one, it's hard to tell where ownership's going to fall or what people are going to want to play, but that's kind of how she rolls. All right, so one thing we can notice straight away in our sim ROI lineups is that in these smaller fields, you can totally get away with playing chalkier lineups, right? We see in the large field, these sims that bubbled up way lower in ownership sum here. We can see an average ownership sum of 147 in these top 50, whereas the top 50 over here, if we highlight them, we have an average ownership of 226. So definitely no need to get as contrarian in your ownership values when you're playing small field. You just aren't competing against a ton of people. What we do see again is some KC onslaughts. Rashee Rice at captain, Mahomes at captain. And I think we're going to see a lot of Mahomes and Lamar together in these lineups, whereas over here we see them as well, but not as much together. Because you just get a good floor and a good ceiling and a good median with Lamar and Mahomes obviously being the quarterbacks. And you aren't competing against enough people where playing both of them hurts you. So if you're playing these small fields, totally throw in both quarterbacks together. It's going to be totally fine. There are lower ownership lineups popping up, but again, a ton of these super high, super chalk lineups are getting in there as far as ownership goes. I would just leave, a couple $100 on the table and might not even need that. It's just a lot easier to play better projected lineups and higher ownership lineups in these small contests. You can see over here we're kind of varying in projection. We get some higher and lower. Average of 97 there for projection, whereas our average here is 100. So 3 points higher projected on average are the lineups in the small field. So it just kind of shows you kind of want to play chalk here in these small fields. Maybe pivot one or two places, whether that's a pass catcher, whether that's your roster construction, or your captain selection. Well, if there's nothing else you guys want to see, we're probably going to call it here and go build some lineups for the slate tonight. So, totally feel free to go through these lineups too in the sim, both large field and small field if you're playing those. Pick out some lineups you like. You won't be able to edit this sheet, but what you can do is go to File, make a copy, and make a copy. And then this new sheet that it's going to open, you'll be able to filter and sort the same way I am, which I'll kind of show you how to do here. So if you make your own copy, you can go here, and in either large field or small field, you can sort by columns like ROI or salary or projection by right-clicking and sorting the sheet. You can filter out different primary stacks that you want to play, like if you only want to play Baltimore onslaughts tonight, you can do that. And if you want to only play Lamar Jackson and Zay Flowers at captain, you can filter like that. Again, with salary, like if you don't want to play lineups that are 50,000, you can exclude those from your salary, and you can find your lineups that way, kind of based on what you want to play. So definitely check out the sheet, make your own copy, and filter it down to what you guys want to play tonight. Best of luck in your contests. Enjoy Thursday Night Football. It is back. We are going to be doing a lot more shows this year as far as Showdown content, main slate Sunday content. Hopefully by Sunday I'm feeling a little bit better. I've got quite a sickness going around right now, so yeah, kind of sad Jem couldn't make it. We were going to do a group stream, but things come up. What can you do? You'll probably see us both on Sunday though, so no worries there. Look forward to seeing you then, so take care and enjoy the contest.